Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jaya Kula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
I wanted to ask you to talk about being prepared and the energy to bring to being ready for an escalation of violence.
If you're being a practitioner, your number one preparedness is that you are going to protect your practice. I was thinking about this just the other day that, especially in these traditions where they tend to be a little rough and tumble and there's lots of stories about extraordinary spiritual awakenings of sorts, there's always a subset of people in these traditions, usually young men, but not exclusively, who are very excited about personal spiritual accomplishment. They're very excited about having esoteric experiences. They're very excited about being a great spiritual person. There's always that element in these traditions. You know, it's not the fault of contemporary culture either. It's the fault of these traditions. Because if you go back and read the literature, when I say literature, I mean scripture and commentaries and things like that, especially as we move forward in time, but starting a long time ago, there is a protagonist that is often talked about in these traditions, and that protagonist is called Vira, hero. That's definitely a male protagonist and someone who has great spiritual accomplishment. And that is in terms of powers that they have. So that figure of the Vira, the heroic practitioner, has been in these kinds of traditions for a very long time. And there's some subset of people practicing in these traditions for whom that's why they're here. That's what they want. Unfortunately for them and many other people who buy into that, what these traditions are actually for is being more like God, being more like the natural state, being more like Lord Shiva, being more unencumbered and unconditioned. And when you are more like Lord Shiva, you are less for yourself and more for others. The fruit of the practice is not to have a self-image as a great practitioner or to be known for spiritual powers or to be blithering on about one's spiritual experiences and all the things. My Kundalini rose, I healed somebody, I did this, I did that, I did the other. I heard this teacher talking the other day about them achieving realization and their mind is free of thoughts. And I was like, who cares, really? If that was what this was about, I would have been out of here a few decades ago. In any case, not to diss the tradition, because there are also many other scriptures and writings and commentaries where devotion and being for others is the main point. But we don't have to read it in a book. When we have contact with the natural state, we learn this. That's what we learn. That there is a fundamental beneficence and compassion built into reality. And if we are actually in touch with that, that's what we are caring about. So whether you withdraw or go sit on a mountain or move to Costa Rica, or whether you or whether you get more involved or make your house into a sanctuary for people running from ICE, whatever you do, as long as you are being in the state of your practice and you're able to do that, and that whatever you're doing is helping you to grow in your practice, that's what you should be doing. Because that's what will lead you to be of the most benefit going forward. We think of benefit in very narrow ways. We have to help in these very specific ways. But that's not true. That's really not true. There are many, many ways that we can give and be of assistance and help others. But we really can't know what's the best thing to do in any particular circumstance unless we're more awake. Otherwise, we're sort of more or less following a pro forma or some concept that we have, which we should do until we have more direct knowledge. But the point is to get more direct knowledge. Each person's going to have to decide that for themselves.
I think I'm most scared of this stuff when I imagine going through it alone and actually imagining going through it with all of you. That's something different.
I agree with that 100%. Community is paramount. And also lack of community is part of what is enabling all of what's happening. So when we are relying on each other and forming community and centralizing community in our lives, that is medicine. What if it looks like there could be a nuclear war? Or what if like the bombs start dropping? What should we do? And definitely the first thing comes to my mind is gather. If we're going to die, let's just do that together. I want to make a video about honesty and how much more important honesty is right now. Those of you that have studied with me for a while, you know that in Ayurveda, honesty is a protector of and builder of ojas. Ojas is both the essence of kapha dosha and also the essence of all the dhatus, of all the tissues in our body. And it is related to our immune system on a bunch of different levels. So our actual immune system, like we would think of it normally in medical terms, but also our subtle immune system. And our subtle immune system, another word for that would be resiliency, and the ability to maintain some sense of value and even cheerfulness in the face of difficult circumstances, and our ability to roll through difficult circumstances without being completely depleted and destroyed by them. Honesty is number one medicine that helps to preserve and build our ojas. Right now, we're living in a sea of dishonesty. We're basically suffocating or drowning in dishonesty. And that is hurting our immunity. That is hurting our resilience. That is hurting our optimism. It's hurting our ability to feel like we can do anything about anything. And to what degree it's hurting that, being in the sea of lies and gaslighting, it depends on our doshas. If we're more balanced, we're more able to go through this without being utterly depleted by it. But if we're not, or if we have certain dosha combinations, it's going to affect us more severely. We can do a very powerful thing to prepare, but I think not just prepare, but move through is more what I'm thinking. We can do a very powerful thing, which is commit ourselves to being honest. Commit ourselves to surrounding ourselves with honest people and demanding honesty from the people around us. The last thing that we need is more subterfuge, more manipulation, more lies, more hiding things that should be hidden. We can commit ourselves to honesty and to being in environments with other people who are committed to honesty. Now, Ayurveda doesn't only say that ojas is only about honesty. It's about, eating properly for our constitution, just living in a way that is supportive of our body, energy, and mind. And we can do that on a micro level to some degree. And we can't really do that on a macro level right now. That's the whole problem. We're living in an environment where the lack of care and the abundance of cruelty is hurting us, for sure. But we can make a commitment, a deeper commitment to honesty, demanding honesty from each other, and also eating better and sleeping as best we can and all that. So we should do that to prepare and survive, whatever that's going to look like.
What does demanding honesty of others look like to you?
That's a very complex question because I have a very strong relationship to honesty, and I have often been very disturbed by people's lack of honesty in my life. But in any case, what it would look like now at this point in this moment in history would be reminding people that we're all suffering from the dishonesty all around us, and I want to be around honest people. Can you manage that? That's what it would look like for me. Like putting my ask in context of what's happening. Do any of us really need more lies in our life? Do any of us really need to be more manipulated? I mean, if you do, great. But I really, 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 really don't.
As many of you know, I grew up in an apocalyptic cult, and the apocalypse is often used like as a scapegoat to not do the hard work of creating the world that we want to create and coming together in the community that we were speaking to earlier. It's easy to feel like we have to hunker down and get all the water and get all the materials, and all of our energy goes to that, as opposed to like creating true relationships with each other and things that are supportive in the moment, not supportive in some imagined future.
Thank you for
That's it.
sharing that. I really appreciate that. So many thoughts are coming to mind when you were talking. One of which is that the Trump administration is deliberately trying to create a sense of chaos and impending disaster in order to, I guess, have a reason to take over in a more militaristic way. Lots of people are talking about that online, and people are strategizing how to not play into that as much as they can. The other layer, though, is that we're in real destruction. It's not just the specter of destruction. And it causes us to re-examine what's important to us, what is of real value. If you think of the Mahabharata, there are 6 Pandavas, 7 really, but 6, who are active in the most of the story on the Pandava side of things. So the Pandavas represent more wisdom. There are 100 Kaurava brothers. The army is bigger, the number of brothers is bigger, way bigger, right? And the Pandavas have to go through all these different difficult circumstances of loss, isolation, war, humiliation, all kinds of things that happen before they retake their seat of being in charge of the country. I think that's basically telling us that we have all these terrible things happening and they're all humans doing it. But that part of us that is still oriented towards wisdom is more powerful than all of this. When there's a lot falling apart, when things are falling apart, that's when we get in touch with that aspect of wisdom, and we decide to cleave to it, or we decide to cut ourselves off from it more. But those of us that are cleaving to it are the ones who are learning from destruction and moving forward together. That's just how we're built, because wisdom always wins. The Jaya Kula, the mother, is always victorious. The mother representing wisdom. No matter what the forces are arrayed against us, wisdom is always victorious. That doesn't mean this world is going to survive. It just means wisdom is going to be victorious, whatever happens. Someone gets cancer. They're threatened with death. They find wisdom in that. They grow spiritually from that. You lose a job, your house burns down, somebody leaves you. You can find wisdom in all sorts of destructive situations. What is it destroying? Well, a lot of what gets destroyed is our false concepts about things. If someone's threatened with personal destruction, you're coming into an encounter with your mortality. Maybe you don't think about that every day, right? And then suddenly, okay, I have cancer, I might die. In fact, very good chance I'm going to die. I better figure out what's really important to me. And it turns out what's really important to people in general is caring for the ones that they love. That, it turns out, is what's most important to people. For some of us, until we get to that point of facing destruction, mortality in some sense or another, we find all ways to distract ourselves from that. I'll care about my loved ones tomorrow after I earn enough money to buy a Tesla. So we have a lot of distractions. That's how we're made. And destruction focuses us. And it focuses us on the part of ourselves that's stronger and more enduring and more aligned with wisdom.
You were talking about honesty. I was wondering, is masking dishonest?
Yes. I mean, just on the most ground level, like most ordinary possible level, is exhausting. So you can feel, for those that mask a lot in their lives, you can feel how it's just sapping your ojas, sapping your vitality to do that. Absolutely. All dishonesty is not the same. Obviously, people who do a lot of masking because they feel like they'll be rejected or they don't fit in some way, or they're just trying to like navigate a day, that's a really different kind of dishonesty than someone who's gaslighting and manipulating and doing more intentional harm to others. But they both of those kinds of dishonesty are exhausting and depleting your ojas and affecting your immunity, affecting your resilience in life, affecting your cheerfulness, ability to roll with the punches of life. Yeah, they both have those similar kinds of effects. There's a lot of masking that goes on in spiritual communities, which I've desperately tried to get people to stop doing with more or less success, because we have these ideas of what it looks like to be spiritual and how we have to behave and sound and what we have to do in order to convince the teacher that we're good spiritual practitioners. I've said this so many times before, I just hate this. I hate it for you and I hate it for me. And I wish everyone would immediately stop doing it 100%. Just don't have any ideas about spiritual life. That would be preferable.
I feel like some of my masking is just being quiet when I actually want to say stuff. But is that actually what that is?
So being quiet when you feel like you'd rather be saying something because you're maybe afraid of what people are going to think of what you say or something like that. That's also exhausting. It's not the same as remaining quiet in a relaxed way. It's also depleting your ojas.
I often want to talk and I don't want to talk too much.
Well, how would you know what too much is? See, it's also exhausting to construct an edifice of concepts about what other people want from you. That's also exhausting. What they want or what they don't want. You don't really know. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jaya Kula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.